Ditto, I'm not gonna lie, something feels off.
What, mate? Everything seems normal.
It's just me, but don't you feel like it's a bit too cold for late September?
No?
Bro, take off your jacket and feel the air around you.
Oh, jeez, it's cold. Did your drug-addicted brother pay you a visit?
No, the air doesn't smell like methamphetamine and bad life choices, which can only mean one other thing.
Oh no.
NANI?!
A few moments later.
Of all the things I was expecting, getting frozen by Kyurem was the last on my list.
Ironically, we have to make a video on it. Go figure.
So, last time all we did wasn't legitimately expressing our feelings on using the Pokemon in question, but more just making guides on how we use them. However, this time we'll be talking about the king of anti-meta, Kyurem, or more specifically, how it feels to use it.
If I had to sum up using Kyurem in 3 words, it would be turning on cheats. Due to the reduced deck size in Generation 8, as well as a really flashy new move that Kyurem got, this thing rose all the way up from the ashes, from RU straight into OU. With a ban of most OU threats like Maguna, Cinderace, and Urshifu that would check it otherwise, this thing has seized OU with a cold and unrelenting grip.
When you use Kyurem, more often than not, you're using it for 2 reasons. A, you want a horrifyingly good special wall breaker, or B, you want to use an ice type, or maybe both. So, remember when Kyurem dropped to RU and suddenly rose from the ashes because of Gen 8? Well, that was because of one move, Freeze Dry. With most of the water type checks in RU now completely decimated, coupled with Kyurem's amazing attack stats of 30, absolutely uncontested in the special department, nothing is truly safe from this monster as you drop one of the fattest Dracos in OU history, or create a second ice stage with those ice moves. Those things hit even harder on neutral targets, with even Clefable handily getting 2 shot of the specs, and that's without mentioning all the other moves that thing has. It has a lot of coverage. Earth Power makes Heatran quiver in fear, Flash Cannon neuters fairies on the switch, Hidden Power Fire in Nactus allows you to bait and yeet Mega Scizor, and those are nice, but they aren't used all that often. You see, the classic Kyurem strategy is brainlessly spamming your stats while you're on the field, with your coverage moves used for emergencies. And this strategy can work to an extent, because Ice Dragon stats are not something you want to switch into outside of Heatran, probably. As of now, the only things that can comfortable switch into Kyurem's stats in OU are the aforementioned Heatran, Scizor, Bisharp, Melmetal, and Mega Mawile. Even then, an Earth Power or Hidden Power Fire to the face is not something they want to take. Secondly, the thing can tank unsuspectingly well for what's supposed to be a Glass Cannon, a trope which most Ice types have, and then proceed to retaliate with overwhelming power.
I mean, funnily enough, this thing has higher health than Dialga, Palkia, the Weather Trio, and Reshiram and Zekrom, and even bloody Arceus. It's honestly ridiculous seeing this thing tank things a Dragon type would never hope to survive. Heck, this thing can tank Scarf Lele's Moonblast, and that is saying something. The way its stats are distributed and its own powerful offensive typing sure are sights to behold. Heck, I ran a Life Orb Bruce Kyurem and it worked for a while, which says a lot about Kyurem's bulk to the point where running Life Orb on it is borderline viable, but falls a few steps short due to a few fatal flaws.
And that's to do with its ice typing. See those sneaky pebbles? Those are the source of Kyurem's perpetual nightmares. Almost every single time you're a Kyurem player fighting on a field with rocks, you're basically forced to go straight to the fogger just to relieve the pressure. Hazards are a really good way to deal with Kyurem. or at least bait out and subsequently deal with his defogging partners. Case in point, Corviknight, the best defogger in the tier, pairs up with Kyurem really well, but gets some rocks up, force the opponent to switch to Corviknight, yeet on Magnezone, and bam, defogger gone, and your team is free to let those sneaky petals skewer Kyurem.
Not only that, but it's coupled with the secondary typing of dragon, meaning it really can't switch into fairies or dragons safely at all, thus having to read a switch in order to check some of the meta threats, like the omnipresent Z nuking Garchomp. I mean, sure, the dragon typing does give it some hefty resistances compatible with itself, allowing it to switch into rain teams, checking Rillaboom, and barely checking Mega Swampert if rocks aren't up. But then you look at the ice type in general, I can't switch in this thing safely at all, god damn it.
Go Boots?
Ditto! No boots are saving this thing from the copious amounts of its weaknesses. I mean, this thing dies to steals, rocks, fightings, dragons, fairies, and yeah, the list just goes on. And that's not even taking into account the underwhelming defenses that Kyurem has. Sure, it's definitely no slouch with a sub-Roost PP stall set, but even that set will crumble against teams with good support like dual screens. For example, a Regieleki with Light Clay paired with a Zapdos Galarian can easily manage Kyurem's substitute shenanigans, and heck, other dragons can take advantage of other screens, tag ahead, and then yeet Kyurem into the abyss with the dragon stab of choice.
Unfortunate that our meta cheat code has such a long list of checks. But, as we all know, life finds a way, and Kyurem often finds his way onto Ethanol's team holding a Choice Scarf. Choice Scarf Kyurem is a legitimate anti-meta threat in OU, trading the extra power for specs for a way more formidable speed tier, breeding Dragapult, Tornadus, and Weavile one-on-one, which is nothing to scoff at. Heck, this thing manages to casually 1v1 of its soft checks with ease, such as dropping a Scarf Draco on the Charizards, and outright OHKOing non-Scarf Garchomp variants. If it comes in safely, with some good reads, something is going to drop for sure. As mentioned in the Helmet's video, Heatran is just 2 Earth powers from dying to a Scarf Kyurem, Toxapex gets dented hard by Freeze Dry, Flash Cannon with Specs make it 2-hit KO Magikarp Clefable easily, while Ice Beam against Underwear Clef with Rocks Up will easily take the matchup. Draco Meteor just nukes most unresisted targets as well. If you really want to make your opponent suffer, you can slap a Ninetales and an Arctozolt on your team for maximum hail abuse, and stop Blizzard on Kyurem. In those hail turns, everyone's gonna die in one hit. Lando, Lele, Heatran, all the stuff. All except one Pokemon.
This damn thing. Arceus itself cringes at a Blissey or a Chansey if it doesn't have the E-Killer set, and it's not a stretch to assume that Kyurem does that as well. Blissey is probably default the best blanket check to Kyurem, eating up its stabs, setting up rocks, setting tossing, and crippling it with statuses. You know, what the usual Blissey do.
I run the physical Arceus Steel, so not a problem at all.
We're talking about Kyurem against Blissey, you goddamn idiot. You see, Blissey is so bulky SPDF wise that Kyurem with specs needs Focus Blast to 2-hit KO the thing. And with the RNG of this game, let's just say that's a risk I'm not willing to take. But Ryan, Kyurem has substituted as a large health stat, so Seismic Toss shouldn't be able to kill it. And it has Dragon Dance, so it can bait and set up a Blissey.
No, Dragon Dance Kyurem does not work. Please die. However, I would like to mention I once lost to a Protect substitute Dragon Dance Icicle Spear Kyurem. That was very, very, very humiliating. But speaking of Dragon Dance, we have to acknowledge the actually viable 317 speed D-Dancer in the room. The one and only Vibes, Dance, and Dies Pokemon, Kyurem Black.
So, back in early Gen 8 Crown Tundra OU, this thing wasn't bad for some reason, because Gen 8 bestowed upon it Dragon Dance, which made it a really, really potent Dragon Dance sweeper. Notably, I decided to use Power Herb Free Shock to fix Kyurem Black's lack of decent physical ice stab problems. Icicle Spear. I mean, yeah, it's depressing. It's a one-tech nuke, but it hits obscenely hard for what it does, and that's enough to one-shot almost the entire OU metagame save Heatran. With Fusion Bolt and Dragon Claw being the other two moves, Kyurem Black can absolutely demolish Toxapex and other unboosted dragons. And with Landorus Incarnate being not bad and everywhere, it cleans so hard that Kyurem Black had an easy time setting up afterwards. Ah, those were the times. And then they got banned to Ubers, god damn it.
Well, I tried Kyurem Black back in National Dex Anything Goes in Isle of Armor. Don't ask me why. The conclusion, in its Uber home, it needs setup to work, and even if it does, it still can't bloody wall break. The Cosmodusk main, Bulky Groudon denying Fusion Bolt, and Scarf Calyrex all kill it with ease. Sure, there is a possibility that Kyurem Black finally gets a chance in the spotlight, but I can tell you that it takes a painful amount of patience and reading to pull off right. Icicle Spear just doesn't do enough damage, as much as I hate to admit it, and it's especially painful when even bloody Zekrom outclasses it as a dancing wall breaker, due to its electric stab just being better at doing the job. And even that, it has a hard time dealing with Eternus, Kali, Zern, the whole shebang. Unfortunately, with the hyper offense meta in Ubers, there really isn't a good margin of opportunity to remove hazards, so Kyurem's Stealth Rock weakness really just rubs the salt in the wound. Once it gets its boots knocked off by that angry burb over there, good luck keeping it alive in Ubers. However, there is another Kyurem in Ubers which is superior to Kyurem Black by a bit. Meets the Hydrogen Bomb, that is Kyurem White.
Okay, Kyurem White, unlike Kyurem Black, relies on its monstrous base 170 special attack to wreak havoc on Ubers. This thing also releases Freeze Dry in Gen 8, which allows us to check Kyogre in a pinch. While Life of Critical Meteors are always a force to be reckoned with, oh yes, I haven't even mentioned the best part. It might seem like Kyurem White has the same problem as Kyurem Black, being checked by Necrozma hard, but pair Kyurem White up with Groudon, and suddenly it checks Necrozma by doing some serious damage with Fusion Flare on the switch. In fact, pair this thing with either Tailwind support, a team with like a Rotina, and boy, you're in for a treat. Flash Cannon does some serious damage to Xerneas, which most of the time runs mod as overspeed for Geomancy, allowing Kyurem to nuke it into oblivion without breaking a sweat. And yet, this is just on paper, because in practicality, this thing requires ridiculous amounts of support to work due to its nature as a glass cannon. Okay, remember when I said this thing is actually quite bulky? Well, that argument gets completely defenestrated when it gets into Ubers. Sure, it has 125 health and 90 to 100 defenses, but by Uber standards? God, that's a pathetic disgrace. The sad part is, while its coverage cannot take on meta threats like Yveltal and Necrozma on paper, this thing still dies. Its Ice and Dragon weaknesses are exacerbated by the prevalence of Eternatus and Geomancy Xerneas and Marshadow, thus getting checked easily. Sure, it can be argued that Fusion Flare can take Necrozma down, but why bother countering the meta when the entire meta counters you? To add insult to injury, Kyurem Speed Tier is not good for Ubers. I mean, at least Kyurem Black can attempt to outspeed and wall break, even though it fails 90% of the time using Dragon Dance. While for Kyurem White, this thing falls apart the moment something outspeeds it. Eternatus, Geomancy Xerneas, D-Dance Marshadow, whatever I've said, and other stuff, you name it. Everything that outspeeds Kyurem is without a doubt giving it a run for its money, and trading power for speed and giving it a scarf is just a naive delusion in Ubers. This thing needs Life Orb to actually threaten the meta for once, and taking that away shatters its hollow shell of a presence. It's extra frustrating when you run into those holes. This thing can't even get the job done because the entire meta is now against it, unlike back in Gen 5 where it countered and dominated the meta. And despite having the highest special attack stat in the tier, it still manages to get wrecked instead of wrecking its opponents.
Well, it's obvious that Kyurem has the durability of a Chevy Silverado, and its flaws are never getting patched up. I mean, offensive Life Orb Yveltal Sucker Punch does 60% to it. But when you have to force a Yveltal to rely on Sucker Punch to kill you, that alone is a moral victory. This thing's power is still intimidating, and with good speed control, it will clean houses. Again, Kyurem can be quite threatening if you play your cards right, and when you hit that sweet spot with its white form, oh boy, prepare for Nuke City. That is, until you run into Blissey. Ugh.
Well, what can you do against Blissey? And besides, Ditto, it's not like you're actually good at fighting Stall, are you? Well, Ryan, allow me to conclude. Kyurem for me is a mixed bag. Sure, it's the Pokemon that everybody says is the ultimate counter to the OU metagame, when in actuality it is packed with its fair share of downsides to balance out its unbelievable nuking potential. But when you get that opportunity, you slam that Ice Dragon onto the field without hesitation and take it. This thing can win entire games on the spot, and I enjoy every second of it. Sure, it requires a sizable degree of support, but when you get those sweet damage, man, it's worth the effort, and I dig that. Rest in peace, Specs and Life for Kyurem, you have served me well, and I will never forget you.
Wait a second, have we not mentioned Blizzard Kyurem and Hail before? You saw what it can do in the Hail Fit before. Besides, Blizzard freezes more often than Freezing Glare.
Well, not in this house.
What? Don't we also obey the laws in competitive Pokemon here? That's the point of the How It Feels episodes, aren't they?
Ryan, I did talk about Blizzard Kyurem, so shut up, please. Thank you.